I'm here with Bill Pearson, who is the Manager of Developer Experience and Strategy at Intel. That's a rather intriguing title.
Yes.
And thankfully, he's also here to explain a little bit about the strategy of why Intel is here at the conference and why they feel HTML5 is important for the industry.
Yeah, so today is a great time to be a developer. If you think about all the innovation that's happening across these platforms, and if you look at the opportunities that developers have to sell their applications to consumers on multiple form factors and devices, and all the new features that come out from touch to sensors and what have you. But it's not without challenges. If you look at the economics of being a developer, it can be kind of disheartening sometimes. It's about a third of developers make less than $500 a month on their applications. Something like 2/3 of them make less than $5,000 a month. And then marketing costs for applications are about 50% of the production costs. So it's really hard to make an app, to get it in the hands of consumers and to make money on it. Now consumers, they don't help much. They want their apps and all of their data across every device whenever they want them. So what does a developer do today? Well, they write an app for one platform, then they port it to the next platform. And they pay for the porting, they pay for the testing, they pay for the deployment. If they want it on a third platform, they repeat it all over again. So this is money they could be spending on innovation or on marketing, acquiring customers. But instead they're spending it on porting. So what if you could write one application, have that application be deployed across any device, on any ecosystem, and just be available for consumers? We call that transparent computing. And the idea of transparent computing, there's really three things that you would need to make that possible. You need a programming environment that's cross-platform. You'd need a set of flexible cloud services that could work on these many devices and ecosystems. And you need this whole thing to be secure enough that the data and apps would be protected. So HTML5 really is emerging as a credible technology for this programming environment. Right? It's overhyped, and but it's really starting to become a credible technology that developers can use to write cross-platform applications. So Intel's committed to keeping HTML5 open, to helping it improve performance, and to making it run best on Intel architecture.
So Bill, thank you very much for Intel coming here to the conference.
Sure.
and participating. And why in particular what in particular are you interested in talking about at the conference and in your session? And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. There's really three things that we're talking about here. There was a session earlier today where Paul Fisher from Intel and then Adobe came and talked about building device applications with HTML5. And that was an interesting session with some good information for developers. One of the things I wanted to highlight, though, was Adobe came and talked about PhoneGap and how PhoneGap can be used to deploy your HTML5 applications on multiple devices. So the advantage of that is you can write your code once and then deploy it to 2 or 3 or 10 different devices. The second thing that we're talking about is a app porting technology that we have. So it takes applications written in Objective-C and it ports those applications to HTML5. What's really interesting about it is that that's a tough job, and we knew we couldn't get 100% of all the APIs ported over. So we set a target at 50% of the most commonly used APIs. We're getting pretty close to hitting that. So imagine you have this big porting job ahead of you. You run it through our technology first, and about half the APIs get spit out automatically. And then what we do is we flag all of the other ones that we couldn't translate. We stub them out and mark them so you can go in and edit the code and add those yourself. So it really helps with it's already a tough job in porting your app. The third thing that we're talking about is our Intel Developer Zone. This is an online resource for software developers. It's the one place to get both business and technical information, to go and exchange information with your peers, get code samples, compare ideas. We also launched with that an HTML5 zone. And so we've got a playground there where you can put your code up and try it out and play with code samples that we already offer.
So are you about, and I have heard people that go from C++ to say eventually JavaScript. Are you probably the only ones going from Objective-C to HTML5 at this time?
Well, there's lots of opportunity for people that everyone's programming with something.
Yeah,
and,
well, that's a big one. It's interesting. I haven't heard more people doing that, but this is
yeah, I'm not aware of other tools,
yeah.
but there may be others out there.
Okay. So, and this is nice that it's backed by Intel,
Sure.
which is not going away.
Right.
And so with Adobe and Paul, you were just going Objective-C to HTML5 and then wrapping it with PhoneGap? And then
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
going
with
to
Adobe
Android?
and Paul, what you're doing is just HTML5.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it's a PhoneGap, and then from PhoneGap you can go to iOS or
Yes.
Android or BlackBerry or Windows Phone or wherever you'd like to go.
Okay, you weren't doing some whizzy demo where you're going Objective-C, HTML5, and then wrapping
No,
PhoneGap
no,
and
no,
then
not at all. We're actually kind of viewing those as separate because ideally developers will write their apps in HTML5 and they'll start there. And when they do that, they can use PhoneGap to deploy elsewhere. You have a problem if you've already invested in writing, say, for Android with Dalvik or with iOS and Objective-C, because if you want to go to the next platform, you have to port to something. And so what this tool will let you do is port to HTML5. And from there, you can use PhoneGap and you can go anywhere.
As we said, that's one of the reasons why Adobe bought PhoneGap,
Right.
because there was a lot of traction.
Yeah.
But it started with relatively simple apps. Those
Right.
were the ones that immediately went off. And now people are trying to do the more advanced ones, and it's not immediately, there are more challenges to it, although we're also getting a better base out there of knowledge. And then there's a few things that HTML5 needs to do itself.
Yes.
too.
Yes. I mean, that's the neat thing about technology is that it continues to evolve and people continue to innovate on this. When the guy who was doing the PhoneGap talk today was just as excited as could be. He'd been there from the beginning and was telling us the advances he'd seen, but there's more to come. I think we're just at the beginning of this mobile revolution.
So that's exciting that from the hardware optimization side that Intel is behind this.
Yes.
And hopefully it will be good for business that way. I would think so, because HTML5 will sell systems as far as
Sure.
if it is less performant, then that actually is something that you can make up for a bit on the hardware
Right.
side.
Right.
And if not, then you get the larger market. So either way, it's kind of a win that way.
We're also working on HTML5 performance. So we had a talk here about what we call River Trail, the JavaScript parallel extensions for HTML5.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of work that Intel's also doing on the software to help make HTML5 run better.
Yeah, there were some interesting talks at this conference on that. I usually have to run around and don't get to see as many as I'd like, but I've heard some excellent ones on performance here.
Good.
And also some interesting replies to Facebook too. So that'll be fun. I'll have to see those. I also saw Christian Hanneman's one I did get to sit on with HTML5, and I recommend that one for everyone too. And he sort of thinks that in each new technology, and you've obviously seen some at Intel, and as have many of the developers out there, if they're not completely new to it, there's usually this cycle where people get overly hyped.
Yes.
A bit,
Yes.
and then they find out that, oh my God, it didn't slice the bread and Tooth Fairy didn't come, and then it's like, oh man. And he says, right now we're probably there in the HTML5 cycle, and then he says, but with the technologies that make some sense and are really going to be the successors, which HTML5 will be, because that is where it has to go from several standpoints. Then you usually see it go like that, and then some actual real productivity.
Yes. Yes. I think we're just starting to get over that hype cycle, which is great.
So I think we're all in agreement that's about where we are, but that's actually the precursor to getting something done. Real world, then the serious people start getting in and saying, well, okay, it does this and this, and it needs this, and
Right, to get realistic expectations. And,
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that, and it's exciting to have you and Adobe there. Edge worked on all the browsers. We have a little Edge animation on our site, and that is working in IE9 in spite of what everybody says about HTML5, that all you have to do is test it on IE9 and it won't work. And Adobe has made that cross-compatible, which is the kind of thing that you need to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked. And the person who programmed our animation, because originally we had an animation and we had to, I had to do it, and I have a programming background, but I was using CSS3 directly. And then we had someone do it with Edge who had no programming background
Oh, wow.
and was able to do it. And to me, that starts talking about a wider adoption.
Yes.
Because in the past, it was really the designers
Right.
that drove Flash.
Now you're seeing a lot broader audience being able to program in HTML5.
Yeah, or even get around the programming start, at least
Right.
for the animation, and then if it goes the same cycle as Flash did, it's the designers who get in there and get all excited and get something cool looking, and then they run into a wall, and they have to bring the programmer friend in, and
Sure,
then you
sure.
start getting the more complex applications.
Right.
But it's the designers who actually, I think, drove Flash for universal adoption as well
Sure.
as the video, and not necessarily the programmers, because if they can get a tool where they can actually get something done, and get themselves in trouble, then they bring in other people to help bail them out, and you start getting universal adoption.
Yeah, it is great to see that when technology becomes more accessible, that more types of people can start using it, and some of them can hide the technology and just do cool things with it.
So, in closing words with Intel and strategy in the future with HTML5, would you like to say anything about that?
Sure, come to our Intel Developer Zone. It's software.intel.com/html5, and that's where you'll find all the interesting things that we're doing with HTML5. You can sign up there for to be notified as we add future enhancements to that and future technologies.
And that's, what was that on the web again?
Software.intel.com/html5.
Great, so you can just sign up there, and then you can connect with Intel.
Absolutely.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you so much, Bill.